Hello, if you want to watch exclusive lemon content on What If Naruto, then go to my Boosty. The first link in the description here contains such hot stories for adults, such as What If Naruto was a daddy for Sarada, or Kushina and Mikoto Vulgar Naruto mommies. Follow the link and enjoy. I'm waiting for you.
Don't listen to my enemies, they're just full of jealousy. This legacy, you gon' see what's left of me. You gon' see success in me. You ain't seen the rest. I just wanna be the best at what I know. Better than the rest, just watch me grow. Put me to the test and watch me go. This is my quest, I'ma make it known. They call me obsessive, oh I know. Call me selective with my notes. Call me aggressive with my flow. Call me offensive, even though. Joey ain't gonna lie, life's tough. Try to get by, life's rough. Try to do it right, it's not enough. Even though you try, you still mess up. But I'm still gonna fight for what I love. Still gonna die. For what I love, still gonna try, I won't give up, still gonna fight until I've won. They say I'm way too obsessed, and I've got nothing left, and I'm not quite there yet. But those words, Chapter 1. An unexpected ceiling existed a long time ago. A nine-tailed demon fox. By brandishing them, he could destroy a mountain and cause a tsunami. To counter it, the villagers gathered some ninjas. On the battlefield, the Ambu, Hounen and Chunin of Kanawagakure no Sato devoted themselves completely to the fight. Against the great Kubino Yoko. The forest where they were fighting was strewn with the corpses of badly beaten ninjas. Many of these bodies were mangled, others crushed to the ground or being trampled by the big fox or partially devoured. Among the many casualties were men, women and children who were not shinobi. And this would continue if the Kyuubi was not stopped. We have to hold on until Yondaime arrives, the injured Jounin shouted, before returning to the charge to fight Kyuubi. Don't let him get near the village, another wounded Jounin shouted, kneeling down to catch his breath before returning to action. Moments later, a giant reddish-brown toad, known as Gamabunta, was seen making its way through the forest. Towards the big red nine-tailed fox, with a very familiar blonde shinobi, dressed and equipped as a Jounin, Av. Standing on her head and wearing a white trench coat with flame designs on the bottom. The presence of this shinobi was a spectacle for everyone who saw it, except for the Kyuubi. This shinobi was Namikaze Minato, also known as Yondaime Okage. The big nine-tailed fox growled fiercely as he stared at Yondaime. Upon seeing it within reach, Yondaime began to make a series of complex manual seals, starting the process of sealing it. However, the Kirby pounced on Gamabunta in an attempt to kill Yondaime. Seconds before the Kyuubi reached Yondaime, a bright flash of white light covered the forest, blinding everyone present. After several moments, the great light went out, restoring everyone's sight. Kyuubi no Kitsune, Gamabunta, and Yondaime had disappeared. The fight was over, and the Kyuubi was finally defeated, but at a high price. Meanwhile, Sarutobi Irizen, also known as Sandai Myokai, was in a secret chamber with a crying newborn baby, lying on a cushion on the floor, surrounded by ceremonial candles. 3 Sambu were also present with Sarutobi, and Ruzen suddenly felt a very powerful chakra heading towards the baby. He sighed sadly, knowing that Yondai had successfully performed the forbidden sealing jutsu on me, which had cost him his life. The chakra suddenly burst into the chamber and made its way into the baby's stomach. However, seeing this chakra alarmed Irizen. The chakra that was being infused into the baby was not red as expected. On the other hand, this very powerful chakra was blue and gave off a very familiar aura. With a flash, the blue chakra was completely infused into the baby, thus completing the sealing. The baby was still crying with a seal on his belly that shone with a majestic blue glow. Irizen rushed to the baby and saw that an unexpected event had just occurred. My God, Irizen said quietly, surprised. This was most unexpected, how could this happen? One of the Zambu burst into the chamber and headed towards Irizen. Sandaime-sama, the Kyuubi is gone, and so is the Yondaime Okage. The sealing was a success, wasn't it? Irizen sighed to himself and said, yes, it was a success. However, the Kyuubi was not the one that was sealed in Naruto. This revelation greatly alarmed the Zambu who were present. Sandaime-sama. You mean the Kyuubi is still out there? I don't know what happened to Kyuubi, but I do know what happened to Yondaime. The Zambu anxiously awaited Sarutobi's answer. It was sealed on his own son. A week later, Sarutobi Irizen, the reinstated Sandaime Okage, was in his office with reports from all the Jounin and Chunin, who were delivering detailed reports on the Kyuubi attack. The casualties were catastrophic, and the body count and the search for the missing were still ongoing. Many lost their lives that night. Men, women, children, and many of the best shinobi in Konoha. Many were left orphans, widows, or widowers. The physical, mental, and emotional damage caused to Konoha left countless people traumatized, some homeless because their homes were destroyed, others without family, and all heartbroken by the terrible event that hit them, for unknown reasons. Still, they had to move on with their lives, or what was left of them, and look for a better future. While Irizen continued with his paperwork, he turned his attention to Naruto, who was now sleeping peacefully in his crib. He sighed, wondering how the Yondaime Okage ended up sealed in his own son, with a jutsu meant to seal and imprison the Kirubino Yoko in Naruto. I had no idea what could have happened seconds before the Kinjutsu took effect. But if one thing was for sure, it was that the Kyuubi had disappeared, and there had been no reports of the big fox's presence anywhere. Much to everyone's relief. Getting up from the chair, Sandaime approached the sleeping baby. Looking at him in amazement, she wondered, "Yondaime, what exactly happened during your fight with the Kirugi? How did you end up sealed? And what happened to that nine-tailed monstrosity?" Sarutobi continued to stare at the boy in amazement, while remembering what happened a few hours after Kirugi's defeat. Flashback. A week ago, 2 hours had passed since the defeat of the Kyuugi, and the consequences were already being felt by the people. Meanwhile, Sandaime was in the meeting room with all the advisors and clan leaders. The Zambu who had been in the secret chamber with Irizen before were also present and mounted guard. Naruto was sleeping peacefully in Sandaime's arms. They were discussing the matters related to Yondaime's only living son and heir and what they should do with him. Sarutobi had just explained in detail what happened to Yondaime and how he was sealed in the body of his newborn son. Of course, they were speechless. After a long moment of silence, Yashi broke the silence. "Are you serious, Sandaime-sama?" "I'm serious," Irizen replied. The kinjutsu that Yondaime performed was aimed at sealing the Kyuubi in Naruto and ultimately taking his life for performing it. However, for reasons still unknown, Yondaime himself, ironically, fell victim to his own jutsu and was sealed in his own son. There are numerous possibilities about the effects that the sealing of Yondaime in Naruto will have on the young man as he grows up. For what it's worth, Naruto is practically a born Okage. Sarutobi looked around as the advisors and clan leaders muttered about what they had just told them. The idea that a newborn would receive everything that made the Yondaime Okage the most powerful and feared shinobi in the shinobi world was unreal. But Sandaime Okage himself said it clearly. The possibilities and potential of this son of Yondaime-sama are almost unreal. Limited, Yashi acknowledged. In some ways, Namikaze Naruto is the reincarnation of Yondaime-sama. You might see it that way, Sandaime said. However, Naruto is Minato's son, not Minato reborn, despite the situation the boy is in. The boy possesses great powers that are passed down from father to son in a strange way, Koru said. Nodding, Irizen declared. That is also why he is in grave danger if the enemy nations and villages find out that Minato is sealed inside his own son. One of the extremes could happen. Enemy nations and villages would try to kill the child, or, most likely, kidnap him to raise and train him, to become part of their nation and turn him against us. The consequences would be disastrous for Konoha Agakure if they corrupt Minato's legacy. Naruto will need protection of the highest level. Irizen watched all the clan leaders and advisors talking about what could be done for Naruto. A couple of minutes later, it was already talked about. Sandaime-sama, with due respect, requested permission to adopt and raise Minato's heir, establishing him as part of the Yuga family's main house. Hearing those words, Sarutobi reflected on what might happen if he entrusted Naruto's guardianship and upbringing to one of the clan leaders. Seeing their faces, he noticed that everyone, even Omura and Koru, were more than willing to adopt and raise Yondaime's only child without resisting. However, from what I imagined about the possible upbringing of Naruto under his tutelage, the results did not seem at all encouraging. by visualizing what might happen if Naruto was raised by Yashi as part of the main branch. He saw that Naruto would learn a lot from the Hyuga clan as a whole. It was true that Naruto would have been trained in the best arts. However, Yashi's stern and cold attitude was no secret to Sarutobi, and he also saw Naruto adopting and imitating that attitude. Combining that with training in the Hyuga arts and Minato's combat arts, Naruto would become ruthless and see everyone else as inferior to him. Bad qualities for an Hokage. Observing the leader of the Uchiha clan, Sarutobi also saw that Naruto learned a lot from them. However, like the Hyuga clan, the Uchiha clan was a proud clan, thanks to the power that its lineage limit showed, and due to his arrogance, saw Naruto having fierce rivalries with the Uchiha prodigies, and looking to prove who would rise up as the dominant figure. Especially since Naruto did not possess his lineage limit or that of any other. With the Nara clan, he saw Naruto become a more strategic and lethal assassin. As the Nara clan was known for their great skill in efficient combat tactics and strategies, especially for their ability to manipulate their shadows. After a long mental deliberation, Hiruzen said, "Honestly, I appreciate your thoughtfulness and openness in being willing to adopt the child. And so, however, I must respectfully decline the offer." Yashi's eyes widened upon hearing this, and he said, "Sandai Maesama, Naruto has great potential to become one of the strongest shinobi in Konoha, and with him, under my tutelage, he would become one of the greatest prodigies and Hokages ever produced by Konoha. I recognize your good intentions for the boy Yashi, and for anyone who is willing to take on the responsibility of taking care of Naruto." Sandaime sighed and continued, "However, Naruto needs balance in his life. It has already been infused by a powerful Hokage whose knowledge, wisdom, stamina and abilities will possibly be absorbed by the child gradually as he grows up, no doubt. Therefore, he will need someone to balance him. In order for the child to have the best intentions, I will send an ambo to find someone of my choice, to raise and educate the heir of my birth." Yashi reluctantly kept silent. It was not the time to argue with the reinstated Hokage, especially after everything that happened before and after the Kyuubi attack. "Should we inform the villagers about Yondaime's surviving heir?" Mura asked him. "No," Hiruzen replied firmly and without hesitation. "If people find out that Namikaze Naruto is Minato's only son, the chances of Naruto being spoiled by the villagers will undoubtedly be high. The child will grow up being ungrateful and will show little appreciation for the things that are given to him. However, the consequences will be the opposite if he learns to earn his due instead of simply handing over his inheritance to you. In addition, it should be remembered that Minato has earned many enemies in many lands, villages, and possibly on other continents. And as I mentioned before, if the enemy villages find out that Yondaime has an heir infused with Minato himself, the consequences would be disastrous for both the boy and the entire village of Konoha." Everyone in the chamber allowed Sandaime's wisely chosen words to be absorbed while they thought about what he was saying. "For this reason," continued Hiruzen, "the child's name will be changed. He will adopt his mother's maiden name, as Minato instructed him before his battle against the Kyuubi. His new name will be Uzumaki Naruto. Everyone will be told that Minato and his entire family died as a result of the Kyuubi attack. When Naruto grows up and reaches a mother, whom he deems appropriate, with the ability to take care of himself, he will receive everything that belongs to his family, and the truth about his inheritance will be publicly explained to him." Everyone present nodded in a sign of understanding, and Ruth was silent for a moment while she allowed everyone to take in her words. With a more serious and firm tone, he continued, "Until then, no one here will be able to mention to anyone outside the council the truth about Naruto's true ancestry, without my or Naruto's consent. If my words are not fulfilled, the act will be considered treason, and the punishment will be severe. This is my law as an Hokage restored." The clan leaders and advisors knew that they shouldn't take Sandaime's words lightly, especially if they didn't want to provoke his anger. End of the flashback. Sarutobi sighed again while thinking about what happened after the meeting. Flashback. A week ago, 3 hours after the meeting with the advisors and clan leaders, Hiruzen convened the Konoha Grand Assembly. Many attendees were just wondering what Hiruzen would tell them about the attack and the defeat of the Kyubino Yoko. Many murmurs circulated through the assembly until Sandaime appeared on the roof of the tower. Ryokage, getting everyone's attention. The crowd was silent when they saw the Sandaime Okage take the stage. People of Kanawagakure no Sato, Sandaime addressed everyone. As you well know, a big monster known as Kubino Yoko has attacked our village for reasons unknown to us. Unfortunately, many of our inhabitants and shinobi have lost their lives fighting the Kirogi, and many parts of our village have been left in ruins. It hurts me deeply that such a terrible and evil event has struck us. Irizen paused while observing everyone present. Taking a deep breath, he continued. The Kyubi would have continued his attack had it not been for the sacrifice of the Yondaime Okage, who disappeared and died moments after defeating Kyubi no Yoko. I am also saddened to inform you that Yondaime's honorable wife Namikaze Kushina was also killed during the attack. Again, Sandaime stopped and observed the faces of everyone present. He knew how much they loved his successor, Yondaime, and his wife Kushina, and Sandaime was no exception. The villagers knew that his wife was pregnant and were looking forward to the birth of Yondaime's son. While it was true that Minato's wife had died, it hurt him to have to make everyone believe that both Minato and his son were dead. But it was for Naruto's own protection. Irizen continued. Yes, the loss of Minato and his family is a great loss, as is that of all those who lost their lives on this tragic night. But their deaths were not in vain. Minato, and all the brave shinobi and citizens of Kanawagakure who died gave their lives to protect the village and all their loved ones. Therefore, their deaths were honorable and should be commemorated. Despite everything that happened here tonight, the fact that the village still exists testifies to the brilliant will of fire that burns in all of us. A fire that will not be extinguished in the shadows of the night in the face of enemy forces. The events of this evening have shown us this truth. Although we will never be able to recover the lives of those who lost their lives in the battle, we can honor their sacrifices and losses by rebuilding Kono Agakure no Sato for a brighter future. In this way, the next generation of Konoha, and all future generations, will learn from the great things that their people and their ancestors have done for them and their village, and with pride their spirit, and the iron will of the village. The villagers burst into applause upon hearing Sandaime's words. Needless to say, people took everything he said seriously. End of the flashback. Sarutobi came out of his thoughts when someone knocked on the door. Yes, you can come in. The door opened and revealed a masked Ambo standing in the doorway. Sandai Mae-sama, the Ambu said as he bowed in token of respect, the one you sent has arrived. Izuchena felt the Ambo, giving her permission for the visitor to enter her office. The visitor entered and the Ambo left, giving privacy to both Sandaime and his guest, who did not have a happy expression on his face. Sandaime knew that this meeting was not going to be easy at all. Sandaime and his guest looked at each other for a moment without exchanging a word. After a short silence, Sandaime said, "Senju Tsunade, it's been so long." "Yes, that's right, Sarutobi-sensei," Tsunade replied to her former sensei. She was around 40 and was known by many as the Suker, one of the legendary Sannin. Tsunade commented, "The Ambo you sent to look for me told me that something terrible happened here a week ago. Judging by the damage and people's faces, I would say that a lot more has happened than the Ambo was willing to admit. And look. He also told me that there was another important matter at stake, a matter of the utmost importance, that required my presence before you. He didn't tell me what he was saying, something that only you could tell me as it was highly confidential, and only I could hear it." Momentary pause. "The truth is that I did not want to return to this village, although I did it reluctantly. Since you personally requested my audience." And Ruth inside. "I understand that many things have happened in your life that have made you feel resentment towards your hometown. And I will not make excuses about it." Before Tsunade could say another word, she saw a crib next to Irizen's office. Curious, she went over and looked inside, seeing a 1-week-old baby sleeping peacefully. Her mood improved when she saw the child. Smiling at the newborn, he asked his former sensei, "Who is that cute blonde baby? Surely he's not your grandson, is he?" "You're right, he's not my grandson," Irizen replied. "His name is Naruto, and he's Yondaime's son and heir." The Sannin's eyes widened in surprise upon hearing those words. "Minato had a son," Tsunade said, surprised and happy. "Speaking of Minato, where are he and his wife Kushina?" Yondaime is on a diplomatic trip in another village, and you're covering for him, especially after everything he's been through. And where is the child's mother? Tsunade saw a certain look on Sarutobi's face, which was a bad omen. Tsunade, began Irizen, I humbly ask you to adopt Minato's son. That's when he looked at his old sensei and thought he had lost his mind. You want me to do what? Tsunade screamed, which caused Naruto to wake up and start crying. And Ruzen sighed again as he reached over to Naruto, pulled him out of the crib, and put him in his arms, finally calming the child down. Adopt Minato's son, Tsunade asked incredulously. Have you lost your mind? Where exactly are Minato and his wife? Tsunade, Irizen replied quickly interrupting her. Please calm down, Tsunade. In a calmer tone, he suggested, have a seat, Tsunade. There's something I have to tell you. I'm sorry to tell you that you're not going to like what you're going to hear. With no other choice, Tsunade pulled up a chair and sat down, as her former sensei had advised her. Irizen pulled his office chair closer to his former student and sat down with Naruto still in his arms. Irizen began to explain. A week ago, the big monster known as Cubino Yoko arrived and attacked the village. However, days before the attack, Minato received news from one of his most important shinobi about the Kyuubi's eventual arrival in Konoha. As you well know, Tsunade, the existence of the Kyuubi was not a myth in Konohagakure even before its attack. People knew what the monster was capable of after hearing many stories about his power. However, many did not understand why the Kyuubi was coming to attack Konoha, killing and destroying everything in its path. On its way to our village, Minato worked day and night looking for a way to stop the creature, but had little success. It was a big burden for him, and the fact that his wife was about to give birth prematurely. Due to the great stress and frustration they both felt did not help. Actually, the villagers knew that Minato was married to a very skilled kunoichi who was pregnant with his child. What they do not know is that he entered into part-time work. Premature birth, due to the intense stress, she and her husband suffered the night of the Kyuubi attack. She was secretly transferred to a private clinic during the attack, where she gave birth to her son. Unfortunately, due to the severe emotional distress and weakening of his wife, Kushina died shortly after giving birth. Naruto, and the news of his wife's death, devastated Minato. Tsunade already felt the tears pooling in her eyes before they trickled down her face. Sarutobi continued, and what added even more pain to Minato was the ancient Yuji Kinjutsu he finally found to seal and imprison the Q. Yoko came. However, the beast was too powerful to be contained in an inorganic or animal vessel. This Yuji Kinjutsu required a human newborn whose umbilical cord was freshly cut. And no other child had been born that night except his. When performing the Kinjutsu, the sealer had to give up his life for the Yuji Kinjutsu to take effect. Sadly, I still remember the desolate look on Minato's face when he saw that his life's work and the family he so longed to form with his wife and son had been destroyed in such a short time and reduced to nothing. Even if another child had been born that night, Minato would not have asked any parent to sacrifice his child. Not even a child born that same night, who was orphaned simultaneously after losing his parents as a result of the attack of the Kirugi, in such a heavy load, especially if he himself was unwilling to do it with his own son. Therefore, he used and sacrificed his own newborn son and his own life for the ritual that sealed the Kyuubi. It was a tragic and cruel burden that broke Yondaime's heart, knowing that he lost everything he loved in one night. For the preservation of Konohagakure and preventing the Kyuubi from causing more destruction and massacres than he had already caused. Tsunade sobbed as more tears streamed down her face. Hearing this story made her hate Okage's post even more, as she had lost loved ones who were somehow related to the title. Irizen himself could not prevent some tears from falling from his face as he recounted the horrible event in full detail. He wiped the tears that were falling from Naruto's face before continuing. Before Minato went to fight the Kirugi, he asked for a moment alone with Naruto. I respected his wish, although I stayed close enough to the tent to listen to what Yondai was telling me. While he was alone with his son in the store, Minato freely let fall some tears that he contained, while cradling Naruto in his arms, apologizing and telling him that that was not what he wanted for him. I remember him telling Naruto that he wanted to grow up in a village where he could grow and mature into a great shinobi, inherit the villages will to fire with him and his mother, and be loved by everyone in the village, not only as their honorable son, but also as Namikaze Naruto. But Yondaime knew that wouldn't be possible because of the monster he attacked and ruined all his dreams. Yondaime knew he had to do something, as it was his duty as an Hokage and as a father to protect Kono Agakure, to make sure his son had a future in the village he loved so much. Namikaze Naruto, my son, you will be the hero who defeated Kubino Yoko and saved Kono Agakure no Sato. Minato whispered to Naruto before calling me to explain what he wanted me to do. Yondaime made it very clear to me that she didn't want the villagers to know about her son's existence, at least not yet. Originally, his intention was for Naruto to be considered the great hero who saved Konoha by sealing and imprisoning Kyuubi inside. The boy's name changed from Namikaze Naruto to Uzumaki Naruto. He gave her his mother's maiden name to protect her true identity and heritage. Although he wished there was another way to defeat Kirugi, he knew he had to pay a heavy price to stop the creature. Naruto would be turned into a living sacrifice, and his father would give his life to save Konoha and everyone who lives here. Tsunade didn't want to listen to the story anymore. His heart was breaking. It was too tragic and horrible to bear. Before she could intervene and tell her former sensei to stop telling her the story, Irizen added. However, the situation took an unexpected turn after the execution of the Kinjutsu. Tsunade suddenly raised her head at the words of her former sensei. He continued. A very powerful chakra was directed towards Naruto and infused into the boy's belly. However, this chakra was not red as we expected, but blue. No one knows what happened to the Kyuubi after starting Kijutsu, but one thing is for sure, Yondaime was sealed in Naruto. The Sanin's eyes widened in shock and utter disbelief. He remained silent, while his former sensei allowed him to process everything he had told him so far. A moment later, Sandaime continued. No one else outside the village council, apart from you and some Zambu who have been sworn to secrecy, knows this. As far as the rest of the villagers know, Yondaime, his wife and his son have died, along with many others who lost their lives during the attack. Tsunade was speechless at everything she was hearing. It was overwhelming, both mentally and emotionally. I didn't know how much more I could take, and I knew Irizen wasn't finished. As a result of this unexpected twist, the council and I realized that Naruto's situation has changed drastically. With Minato sealed in his being, he will undoubtedly undergo certain physical and psychological changes during his development, and will acquire all, if not most, of everything that made the Yonda and Myokai the man and shinobi who became known in Konoha and the rest of the shinobi world. Do you mean that Minato will take possession of his own son's body? Tsunade asked him in disbelief. No, Irizen replied quickly to reassure him. Rather, Naruto will inherit and absorb his father's knowledge, wisdom, stamina, abilities and chakra in a gradual process. As he grows up, basically becoming a born Hokage, the child will remain his own individual person, not the embodiment of Yondaime. Because of this, Naruto is in more danger than before. It would have been quite difficult if we had known that Minato had a surviving child, with countless people wanting to consent. Mimaro adopting the little one for his own purposes, and possibly to grab the huge inheritance from Naruto. The situation is worse now with Yondaime sealed inside, and if the enemy villages and nations discover this secret, two worse scenarios could happen. 1. Try to murder the child, or 2. Most likely, try to kidnap him and raise him to become part of your nation, corrupting him and making him our enemy. Either scenario would be disastrous for Konoha and Naruto, and perhaps for other villages and nations if they crossed paths. Sandaime took a moment to observe Naruto, who was already fully awake and observing the environment that was unfamiliar to him. Sighing, Sandai continued to me. The truth is that I would have gladly taken care of raising the child and guiding his upbringing. However, my reinstatement as an Hokage greatly limits the time I can spend with him. And I can't entrust him to just anyone in the village, not even the clan leaders or elders. And the last thing we need is for Naruto to become Orochimaru. I don't want history to repeat itself, and for Naruto to become something perhaps worse than Orochimaru himself. Tsunade was silent. The memory and the pain of Orochimaru's betrayal were still fresh in his mind. Hirai is no longer the type to raise small children, and his role as the author of those books that you hated so passionately. It would not help the child's development. For once, I agree with you, Tsunade commented, although you're being a bit of a hypocrite. Since you also read those books like some closet perverts I know. Annoyed by his comment, Sarutobi cleared his throat and continued with a more serious tone. The fact that I ask you to adopt and raise Yanda's son, and shows me the great conviction and confidence I have in your ability to raise, control and balance the child, as it has been infused by a powerful Hokage. But still, Naruto is an innocent child who has been forced to carry this heavy burden without his conscience feeling. He needs someone who can raise him and ensure his guardianship, and also show him maternal affection. I am more than sure that you can also teach him the advanced arts of medical and healing jutsus. Tsunade listened a lot more than she expected. It was too overwhelming for her at the time. Sandaime knew that she had already been through a lot in Konoha, and the fact that she had lost most of her loved ones, including her grandfather and great-uncle, the Shadaime and Nidaime, her lover and her little brother, who wanted to. Becoming Hokage, he left her with bitterness for his native village. After learning about what happened to Yandaime and her family, and the village as a whole, it was too much. And now her former sensei asks her to adopt and raise Yandaime Hokage's son as if he were her own. I need time to think about it, Tsunade admitted truthfully, with the utmost serenity and a mixture of emotions in her voice. Irizen did not argue and understandably responded. I understand, Tsunade. Take all the time you need. Tsunade approached Sarutobi, indicating that she wanted to carry the child. Obeying, he handed over to Naruto. She cradled the child, wide awake. In her arms, who seemed to stare at her in amazement. He yawned and closed his eyes for a moment before looking back at her. You only have 1 week, and you already have to carry such a heavy load, Tsunade said to Naruto in a low voice, as some tears slid down her face as he gurgled. Irizen smiled and watched the scene in silence. Mother and son, seeing her former student smiling radiantly at who she hopes will be her future adopted son, made Irizen feel a sudden and overwhelming hope for the future. It was strange how, even after the darkest days, he had found such a radiant vision. She did not know what the future would hold for them, but she was grateful that Tsunade was at least willing to consider adopting the child. Later that night, Tsunade was staying at a hotel that night, at least one that was not demolished or damaged during the Kyuubi attack. He barely rested that night, thinking about everything that happened that afternoon in Sandaime's office. He spent the rest of the day thinking about everything that his former sensei had explained to him in detail and what he was asking of him. In reality, he felt that he did not owe the village any favors, especially after everything he had suffered and lived through there. However, Naruto was another story. He was an innocent child who had borne an overwhelming burden at such a tender and fragile age. She's only a week old, Tsunade thought as she sat on her bed in her sleep kimono. It was true that many other children of Konoha, besides Naruto, had suffered a great loss because of that bastard nine-tailed monster. However, Naruto was a very special case. Despite what happened to all the other children who lost their parents, relatives and friends during the attack, they still had the opportunity to rebuild their lives from scratch and start a new life in the village with the help of his fellow villagers and the Sandaime. Naruto, on the other hand, couldn't keep it up, especially since he was infused with the Yandaime Hokage. Two of his relatives were the first two Hokage they built with Ogakure no Sato, and they died young. His younger brother and lover, Dan, wanted to become Hokage because of his intense love for the village and his strong desire to protect it, and they both died young before they could fulfill his wishes. Now she is being asked to adopt and raise a newborn boy who is only a week old. He will inevitably grow up to be a strong Hokage at an unknown age if he lives long enough. Life is so cruel to me with its ironies, she thought to herself while meditating on Naruto's current situation. While playing with the necklace around his neck, the one that once belonged to his grandfather, Senhua Shirama, Shadai Myokai, Naruto probably wouldn't be able to live a normal life as a result of the changes he will experience. Besides that, all of his father's enemies will now become his enemies, and his father has made many enemies before and after becoming Yonda and Myokai. Somehow, the boy would become the new Yandaime Hokage, he thought, and there was no telling how Naruto would turn out, as he would develop his own personality, which would undoubtedly be influenced by some of his father's characteristics. Naruto is an innocent child who was forced to take on this heavy burden without his consent. He needs someone who can raise him and take care of him properly, and also show him maternal affection. Those were Izin's exact words. Tsunade wondered if she was even active for the role of mother, since she had never had children of her own. Of course, I helped midwives and nursing mothers with their children in hospitals, and watched how they raised their babies. But actually playing the role of raising a baby is a completely different story, she acknowledged, and she had never raised children before. After the death of her lover Dan, before they had a chance to get married, she lost most of her interests and desires to get married and have children. And now Irizen asks her to adopt and raise a child who will inevitably become a new Yondaime Hokage. Tsunade snapped out of her thoughts when she heard a knock at the door. He turned to the door and said, "Yes." "Tsunade-sensei," a young female voice answered from the other side of the door, "May I come in?" Sighing, Tsunade replied, "You can come in, Shizune." The 15-year-old girl entered her sensei's room. Shinu got in and approached her. "Are you all right, Tsunade-sensei?" Shizune asked in concern. Tsunade looked at the young woman and said, "I'm fine." "Why is she awake?" "I can ask you the same thing," Shizune commented. Tsunade said nothing and looked away from the young woman. Seeing the expression on the older woman's face, Shizune asked, "Do you have something on your mind?" "Besides what Sandaime told me," Tsunade commented, "not much." "What did he tell you?" Shizune asked. "Do you want to talk about it?" Tsunade turned to look at the young woman. After what seemed like an eternity, Tsunade spoke with a serious tone. "Before I tell you, you must swear that you will never repeat what I am going to tell you. Tell no one outside of this room." Shizune felt the firmness of his sensei's voice, and understood that what was going through his mind was not a laughing matter or something that could be taken lightly. Shizune replied truthfully, "I swear. I give you my word." After taking a deep breath, Tsunade started counting. To Shizune everything in great detail, everything that Izune had told him. Shizune listened intently, while her sensei told her the story without interruptions. What the young woman heard left her stunned, and Tsunade had much more to tell her. Shizune already had tears rolling down her face, with some sobbing, as she listened to the harsh and tragic tale about Yondaime and her son, Naruto. This heartbreaking revelation went beyond what I expected to hear. Tsunade let a few tears fall before wiping them away. After Tsunade finished telling Shizune everything about Yondaime and Naruto, she gave the young woman some time to assimilate everything that had been told to her. A few moments later, Shizune regained her composure as she wiped away her tears. He turned to his sense and asked, "So no one knows what happened to the Kirubino Kitsune?" Tsunade shook her head. "Not that anyone is complaining. However, it does generate some concern, at least for the Hokage, and for me. But will you adopt baby Naruto?" "I've been thinking about that since I left the office," Tsunade admitted. "I haven't decided yet if I should do it or not." "Why not?" Shizune asked him. "It's not like you're gonna handle it alone. You will have me here to help you take care of the child. Besides, I've always wanted a little brother. And who didn't want a little brother who is Hokage?" Tsunade looked at her young apprentice with an empty expression. Understanding his words, Shizune immediately apologized. "Tsunade-sensei, I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. I didn't mean to hurt your feelings or reopen old wounds. That is, what I wanted to say is." "It's okay, Shizune," Tsunade assured, knowing full well that Shizune was referring to her late younger brother. "I know you weren't trying to offend me. You just got carried away for the moment, that's all. But still, adopting this particular child will not be a piece of cake. Hell, adopting and raising any child is no piece of cake and will require a lot of sacrifices." Tsunade saw the irony in the word sacrifice, especially since Naruto was originally going to be turned into living sacrifice to protect all future generations of Konoha and everyone else. However, Tsunade continued, "Naruto is not just any child who can be adopted and raised by anyone. I am surprised that Sarutobi-sensei has gone so far as to send one of his ambas to look for me to ask me to raise him as my own son." She sighed, "I'm not even sure if I have mother wood." "Don't say such things, Tsunade-sensei," Shizune replied with conviction. Sure, you're not perfect, and you have some bad habits, but hey, no one is perfect, and we all have our problems. But I've been with you long enough to know that you would be a great mother to that child, and Sandaime-sama too. After all, he wouldn't have gone to so much trouble to find you. If he thought you were unsuitable or unfit to raise Naruto or any other child. The Hokage chose you, Tsunade-sensei, out of all the people, shinobi, clan leaders and village elders, to raise this child who possesses untold potential. Of course, he could have chosen any other mother in the village to adopt Naruto, but he saw something very special in you, Tsunade-sensei, that you might not have seen in yourself, which prompted him to believe so strongly that you were She is the perfect fit to be Naruto's new mother. I firmly believe that you would be a great mother to any child, sanguine or not. And I know your little brother and Uncle Dan would have felt the same way about you. Tsunade stood there, amazed, looking at Shizune. His sincere words were filled with a wisdom that surpassed his age. The old woman was amazed that her young apprentice could make her see and recognize such a thing. Thank you, Shizune, Tsunade said with appreciation, as she wiped the new tears that were falling from her eyes before smiling. I really needed to hear that. And those words coming from you really mean a lot to me. Shizune smiled, knowing that she had managed to heal and restore her sensei's trust. The two women were unaware that someone was listening to the entire conversation from behind the door. The revelation that baby Naruto possessed Yonda and Myokai inside him and eventually acquired their attributes greatly intrigued the intruder. The possibilities with this new Yonda and Myokai are really unique, the intruder thought before quietly leaving before being detected. Hours later that night, in another place, in an unknown place, Naruto slept peacefully in a room guarded from the outside with two ambu. No one could enter without the Hokage's own authorization. 15 minutes later, the ambu saw Sandaime heading towards them. Sandaime-sama, the ambu said as the two bowed in respect to the elder Hokage, who nodded and greeted him. Is everything okay around here? Sandaime asked. The first ambu replied, Uzumaki Naruto, rest easy, sir. No problem has arisen, Sandaime-sama. I'm glad to hear that, Sandaime replied. I would like to see how the child is doing now. The ambu nodded and stepped aside as Sandaime entered the room, before closing the door behind him. Afterwards, Sandaime quietly walked over to Naruto's crib and looked at the child, before putting a sinister smile on his face. A while later, the two ambu waited outside the room for Sandaime to come out. While they were waiting, a voice behind them asked, Is everything okay here? The two Zambu turned quickly surprised to see Sandaime approaching them with two other Zambu, following him to relieve their fellow Zambu of their vigilance. That's Sandaime-sama, exclaimed the second ambu confused. Didn't you come into the room a while ago? Within seconds, Sarutobi registered what had just happened, as his eyes widened with horror and shock. What? Sandaime exclaimed before running towards the door, finding it closed. Shit! Sandaime cursed before breaking down the door and storming into the room, followed by the four ambu. They found an empty crib and an open window. Whoever had entered the room had impersonated him using an Enganojutsu and kidnapped Naruto. But the question was who and how did he find out about Naruto? This was exactly the situation Sandaime had been dreading, and, to his horror, the secret was not long in coming to light. Addressing the four ambu, Sandaime ordered me with full authority. Lock down the village and park as many jounins and chounins as you can at all exits. Gather all the ambu and explain to them that Naruto has been kidnapped. Search the village. Search everywhere. I want Naruto found, and the kidnapper brought back alive for interrogation. We need to find out if he's working alone, or with an accomplice. Alas, the four ambu obeyed, disappearing in a cloud of smoke. Turning to the empty crib, Sandaime thought to me, this is just what I had. Enemy forces attacking at our weakest and most vulnerable moments, right after a catastrophic event, Yondaime. For the sake of your son and the whole village, I hope they find Naruto and bring him back safe and sound soon. Meanwhile, Tsunade was having a hard time sleeping with all the commotion outside. He covered his head with the pillow to try to drown out the noise, but to no avail. Frustrated, she got up, went to the door of her room, and opened it. However, as he was leaving, he stepped on something with his bare feet. Looking towards the door, she saw something that wasn't in the apartment, that didn't belong to her or Shizune. It was a sheet of paper with names of clans and organizations written on it. There was someone here, Tsunade realized. A moment later, Shizune rushed into the apartment and approached her sensei. Tsunade-sensei called Shizune. Turning to the young woman, Tsunade asked, "What's the matter?" "All exits have been sealed," Shizune explained. "The village is completely blocked by order of the Okage. From what I've heard, there's been some kind of kidnapping." Tsunade felt like she had been given a ton of rocks as she looked at the paper in her hands. Squeezing the paper tightly until it crumbled in his fist, Tsunade angrily said, "Wait here." Without waiting for an answer, Tsunade stormed out of the apartment. "Tsunade-sensei!" Shizune shouted, but her screams fell on deaf ears as Tsunade ran swiftly to chase and stop the kidnapper. She didn't mind being barefoot and still in her sleep kimono. All he cared about was getting there and rescuing Naruto on time. From forcing entry to his private accommodation, to kidnapping the newborn he was supposed to adopt, just in case. The culprit of these crimes ended up. To provoke his anger, that night, the Zanbu were sent to rescue and bring back Naruto by any means necessary. The villagers had no idea what was happening as the Zanbu conducted exhaustive searches of the houses. Restaurants, shops, clubs, taverns, wherever they could think of. Among the Zanbu in the search was a teenager named Atake Kakashi, who lost his sensei and teacher, Yandame Okage, a week ago. Because of the Kirubino Yoko. He was still affected by the event and the loss of his teacher, although he tried not to show it. Kakashi already knew who Naruto really was and why he was kidnapped. He wasted no time or energy in searching for his master's son, determined to locate and return Naruto and protect him. Kakashi, with all the and, had to take an oath of secrecy, not to reveal Naruto's true identity and heritage to anyone under severe penalty for part of the Okage itself. Meanwhile, the Hounen and Chunin were following the Okage's direct orders that no one could enter or leave Konoha until the search was over. It was no secret to anyone that something very serious had happened since the Sandaime Okage ordered a mass confinement and a search in this way. In any case, it was the last thing they needed, especially since the Kirugi attack had happened just a week ago, and practically no one had recovered. Meanwhile, a very beautiful woman, with brown eyes, long blonde hair, a slender and shapely figure, with large breasts, was running and jumping from roof to roof at full speed like a real athletic shinobi. Although she already realized that she was barefoot and only wearing her sleep kimono, which fluttered with the wind and the movements of her body, right now that mattered little to her. All he cared about was getting to Naruto, and fast. After seeing the names written on the sheet of paper he found in his hotel apartment, to say that the kidnapper was up to something bad was an understatement. After resting for a moment on top of one of the buildings to catch his breath, Tsunade examined the area to see if anything was out of place. So far, I could only see the Zanbu searching every building they entered, and the Hounen and Chunin staying at their posts. The search for Naruto had been going on for almost an hour, and the kidnapper was still at large. He decided to head to the place where Naruto was last seen. Elsewhere, some other Zanbu searched the room where Naruto had been earlier to see if the culprit had left any clues that might indicate where he had fled after kidnapping him. Tsunade jumped off one of the roofs of the building and landed gracefully on the surface, running towards the small house that once housed Naruto. Stealthily, he searched the outside of the little house, looking for any clues that would serve him. So far, she had found nothing, which frustrated her. He knew the kidnapper couldn't have gotten very far, with all the Zanbu chasing him in an all-out manhunt. His ears soon caught a conversation between two Zanbu. They were talking about how the kidnapper used an Engenojutsu to trick his two Zanbu companions into thinking he was Sandaime. It was then that he realized that the kidnapper would not have tried to escape from the village so quickly, with all the Zanbu after him. Most likely, he was hiding somewhere in the village. After leaving, Tsunade went to look for anything that seemed out of place in the village. The Zanbu kept looking everywhere, without success. 3 hours had passed, and no one had seen the criminal or the child anywhere. The Hounins reported that no one at the stations attempted to enter or leave the village. Sandaime was getting more and more frustrated, furious, but he managed to stay calm. Tsunade decided to repeat her search as she ran and jumped from roof to roof. As he moved, his gaze fell on a young ambu named Kakashi. He remembered who his student was and his status within the ambu. He was about to leave when something caught his eye. Some of the other ambos approached him and asked him why he had deviated from the place where the search had been assigned to him. He invoked a quick excuse before leaving to fulfill his task, while the other ambus continued on their way. Tsunade decided to follow Kakashi secretly to see where he was going. As he followed Kakashi, he noticed that he was going in the wrong direction, completely deviating from the course he had been told. Something unprofessional on the part of an ambu who was supposed to know the routes from Kono to Dillo. Something was up, she realized as she secretly followed him. He soon noticed that Kakashi entered a small hut for a few moments and came out with what looked like a backpack, full of additional search equipment. Kakashi then headed for the door of the main exit, where he met two Jounins posted there. Recognizing his superior rank and the explanation for him to start his search on the outskirts of the village, the two Jounins stepped aside as Kakashi hurried out of the exit door. Tsunade saw him and gave chase quickly before the Jounins noticed his presence and his departure. A while later, the same two ambus went to regroup with four other ambus, when they encountered a very familiar ambu heading towards them with Sandaime. Kakashi, as the first ambu, what are you doing here? Haven't we seen each other a while ago? What do you mean? Kakashi asked. I was with Sandaime-sama for the last hour. That's when Kakashi, Sandaime, and the other Sambu realized. Which way did you see my other self run? Kakashi asked while he, Sandaime, and the other Sambu. They set out to chase the imposter. It was evident that this kidnapper was a cunning and elusive trickster, whoever he was. Meanwhile, Kakashi was running through the forest with the backpack, jumping from tree to tree at full speed. Tsunade was chasing him at full speed, but kept a polished distance, until he knew where he was going. They were already quite far from the village, and Tsunade did not like the situation. She soon saw him land in an open field, but she kept hidden among the trees while she watched. After making sure he was safe, Kakashi left the backpack on the grass and dissipated the eng that surrounded him. Kai, he said as the eng collapsed, revealing his true appearance. The man was wearing a standard Konoha Hounin uniform. He had brown hair and a Konoha front protector with a blade. Tsunade realized that this shinobi is clearly a renegade ninja from Konoha. This explains how he managed to deceive and elude the Zom, Jounin and Chuni. It could even be an exam. Tsuna suddenly saw that the bundle of the backpack also vanished, revealing nothing less than the sleeping baby Naruto, in a basket with two straps to hang it over the shoulders. The renegade ninja looked at Naruto and said, Yondaime Okage, reduced to an inescapable captivity inside your own child. A worthy ruin for someone like you. I'm sure I can get a good price from any village or clan that wants to buy your son. That's not going to happen, a female voice declared. Realizing that he was not alone, the renegade ninja looked around and shouted, Who is walking there? Show yourself. As if he had been given a signal, Tsunade jumped from the tree he was in and landed on the ground in front of his enemy. However, her current beauty and appearance were anything but what the kidnapper expected. Seeing that she was barefoot and barely wearing her sleep kimono, and the little fabric she was wearing underneath, with the wind blowing, the renegade ninja fought with all his might to keep his composure and not suffer a massive nosebleed. Seeing her face, the kidnapper recognized the blonde beauty. Senjutsu Nade, he said, one of the legendary Shani. I didn't expect to find you here tonight barely dressed. I didn't know you were that kind of Kanoichi. Shut up, Tsunade replied angrily. You're the one who broke into my hotel room. I did, he admitted. But tell me, how did you know that I entered your apartment? You left traces of your intrusion, she replied, showing him a crumpled piece of paper. A list of clans, villages, and organizations. The renegade ninja cursed under his breath and replied, Originally, after hearing about your return to Konoha, I was going to attack and kidnap you while you were sleeping, and then sell your body to the highest bidder. However, after listening to the conversation between you and that girl about Yondaime and her son, I understood that kidnapping and selling the child would bring me more money than the body of any Sannin. Bastard, Tsunade retorted as she got into a fighting position. You will not leave this earth with the child. Oh, replied the renegade ninja. And I guess you're trying to stop me. All right, I'll take you out and sell you and the child. Performing some hand seals, the renegade ninja said, Kara no Tsuyosa no Jutsu. At that moment, Tsunade felt as if something was being ripped from her as she fell to the ground on her knees and with her left hand, while clutching her chest with her right. He was breathing hard and felt an inexplicable weakness all over his body. What did you do to me? Tsunade growled as she stood up with what strength she had left. With a sinister smile, the renegade ninja replied, I took away your super strength. It would be foolish to think that I could face you directly and come out victorious while you are at your best. I just had to add an elixir of my own creation to your tea and wait for it to permeate into your body. In addition, it neutralizes your chakra, preventing you from performing ninjutsu and genjutsu. As I said before, my original intention was to attack and kidnap you while you were sleeping after activating the poison. Damn you, Tsunade cursed, it doesn't matter. I will protect Naruto. Do you want to start this fight, or should I go first? The renegade ninja smiled at him sarcastically, took out a gauntlet with long sharp steel blades, and placed it in his right hand. The renegade ninja said, since you insist on fighting. The renegade ninja charged at Tsunade, bringing his right hand closer to her. Tsunade dodged the attack quickly as he continued to attack her. After a couple of minutes, Tsunade took the initiative and went after him. Before the ninja could move, Tsunade hit him, throwing him to the ground. It's not that hard, Tsunade thought confidently. The renegade ninja got up from the ground and looked at his opponent, seeing her in combat position, fists raised, ready to hit him all over. Attacking, the renegade ninja screamed and ran towards Tsunade, who was waiting for him. Upon arriving, Tsunade jumped up and threw herself backwards from the criminal shinobi. The renegade ninja turned around just in time to see Tsunade punch him directly in the face, knocking him down and pulling him away from her. Did you really think you had a chance against a Sannin like me? The renegade ninja let out a sinister laugh as he stood up again and said, well, if you want the answer so badly. I'm afraid your only way to get it is to try to beat it out of me, if you can. As you wish. Tsunade charged at the rogue ninja while he was waiting for her. Tsunade prepared her fist to strike the kidnapper. However, the renegade ninja stepped aside when Tsunade's fist failed. The criminal shinobi jumped to the side as Tsunade turned to face him. He could clearly feel the remaining strength leaving his body due to the absorbed elixir. Still, he had to keep fighting, not for his sake, but for Naruto's. Resorting to taijutsu, Tsunade charged at the renegade ninja, ready to launch a hurricane of punches and kicks. However, the renegade ninja dodged each of his attacks as she continued to advance. The San impressed, while trying to land a blow on him, but he was too fast due to the poison and the jutsu he used. The kidnapper jumped out of her and quickly passed by her before she could see him. What? I'm here! Shouted the renegade ninja. Raging like an uncontrollable bull, he pounced on Tsunade and attacked her, propelling her into the air and pushing her away, until she crashed hard into a tree with a thud. Tsunade struggled to get up after feeling the brutal impact of the latest attack. His whole body ached. Tsunade said weakly, "What the hell was that?" I felt as if I had been hit by a summoning beast. The renegade ninja was standing where he was watching the female shinobi, who was struggling to regain some of her strength. "What's the matter?" he scoffed. "I gave you such a strong sketch." Tsunade hissed at him. "Oh, you still have some fight left. I'm going to remedy it." Tsunade attacked him again. Blow after blow, kick after kick, Tsunade tried to land a blow on him, but she was unsuccessful, as the jutsu kept exhausting her resistance. The renegade ninja blocked and evaded all her attacks. Parting ways, Tsunade took a moment to catch her breath as the renegade ninja stood there, looking at her with a mocking expression. "That's all you got?" he scoffed. "If you don't want to catch your breath anymore, I think now it's my turn to come for you." The renegade ninja pounced on Tsunade and started attacking her. Tsunade did her best to block and evade all his attacks. However, she was having a hard time keeping up as several of his punches and kicks were catching up to her. Tsunade was now the target of his swift punches and cuts with his claw gauntlet, which kept attacking her. She was constantly screaming because of the tremendous pain and damage that the claws of steel was inflicted on him. The renegade ninja dealt her a circular kick that made her jump into the air. Tsunade staggered and rolled on the ground, but finally stopped. I was in more pain now than before. His thin, silky body was covered in dirt and dry mud, and he had multiple bruises and cuts on his face and body. She was bleeding everywhere, and her sleep kimono was completely torn and stained with blood. It's a pity to have had to destroy and desecrate such beauty, the renegade ninja commented. Tsunade, although in a lot of pain, struggled to get up and face her enemy. It took a while, but he managed to stand up. Ready for more, sneered the renegade ninja. You're dead, Tsunade growled. You first. With the strength he had left, Tsunade ran to the renegade ninja and fought with him again, trying to deal him every possible blow. But it was in vain. He couldn't hit him even once because he kept dodging them. The renegade ninja punched her away as she fell to the ground. Then, he screamed and pounced on her with the intention of hurting her more. Tsunade saw him jump and take a turn in the air before he suddenly stood up in a landing position, falling on her feet. Seeing this, Tsunade quickly rolled and landed on the ground, only to see him jump again and land on one of the branches of a tree. Finding out where she was, Tsunade ran to one of the trees and climbed it until she reached her same height. Then she pushed herself up and launched herself at him from the tree where he was standing with his fist outstretched. The renegade ninja was knocked out of the tree and fell backwards to the ground as Tsunade landed where she was before. Seeing where he was lying, Tsunade jumped off the branch with her feet in a landing position to land on his chest. However, the renegade ninja saw him, bent his legs back, and lifted his feet. Tsunade giggled when she saw him, but she couldn't escape as she fell on her feet. After making contact, the renegade ninja pushed her back, lifting her into the air. Tsunade did a somersault in the air and started to descend. The renegade ninja jumped up and saw Tsunade approaching. Before she could land, he pounced on her and gave her a strong kick in the chest, sending her straight into a nearby tree, which she crashed into before falling to the ground and becoming motionless. Seeing that he did not get up, the renegade ninja assumed that he had emerged victorious and said, I must say, Tsunade, defeating you even when you were weak was no easy task. No bitch like you has ever caused me so much trouble. Hearing that, Tsunade awakened a new strength. If there was one thing Tsunade never liked, it was being called a bitch. The renegade ninja turned and headed towards Naruto, not realizing what was happening behind him. With renewed strength, he sat up without feeling pain in his already battered body. And shattered. The renegade ninja felt strong murderous intentions behind her back. He turned around and saw Tsunade standing there, with an expression that sent a shiver down his spine. With dazzling speed, Tsunade pounced on the renegade ninja and dealt him a very hard punch in the face. Kara, blowing him up into the air before hitting him with brutality and measured speeds. The renegade ninja did not have the time, the strength, the speed or the skill to evade this new and brutal attack. While receiving blows, punches and kicks all over his body, from head to toe, at full speed and with devastating effectiveness. Tsunade jumped up and hit him in the chest with both feet, sending him flying through the air before crashing hard into a tree, forming a body-shaped slit. His body was badly injured and he was bleeding from the mouth. The renegade ninja no longer had the strength to move or fight. During the attack, Tsunade, an expert in human anatomy, inflicted severe damage to certain parts of his body, organs and nervous system, leaving him completely vulnerable and defenseless against any attack. Tsunade slowly approached the older kidnapper, Treaty, who saw her approaching. When she reached his side, she looked at him with a cold and indifferent expression. Tsunade could see the anger on his face, but she also saw that his eyes were revealing the truth to her. He saw the fear radiating in her eyes. I was very scared, although I tried to hide it. He wanted to move and fight, but he felt unable to do anything. Tsunade soon heard Naruto wake up and cry for attention. Seeing that the kidnapper no longer posed a threat, he approached Naruto to take care of him. When she reached the baby, she knelt down and took him out of the backpack, wrapping him in her blanket. Sitting on the grass, leaning on a nearby tree, she cradled and rocked him to calm him down. Even though her body was going numb, she beamed at him while he was babbling. She came up to him and gave him a gentle kiss on the forehead. "My little Naru-chan," Tsunade said fondly, "I risked my life to save and protect you. And I will gladly do it again for you, my little Naru-chan." Moments later, Sarutobi, Kakashi, and the Zumbu arrived at the place and saw a very battered and weakened Tsunade, singing and lovingly cradling Naruto, who was now sleeping, despite his terrible condition. Not far and away, the culprit lay motionless on the ground, in intense pain. "Tsunade," Sandaime shouted with concern as he and the others ran towards her. She smiled radiantly as her eyes became heavier and heavier before she was sent into a world of total darkness. Tsunade's eyes opened to a new environment when a bright light illuminated them. He strained a little before his eyes readjusted to the surroundings. She found herself in patient clothes, lying on a medical bed with bandages on some parts of her body and face. But the pain she was feeling had disappeared. He had an intravenous needle inserted into his right arm and several wires connected to his upper chest, where his heart and lungs monitored his vital signs. He realized that he was in the hospital in Konoha. Looking at her room, she saw that it was very tastefully decorated and had bouquets of flowers from the flower Lorister a Yamanaka. There were wrapped gifts, baby accessories, greeting and get well soon cards on 2 tables. He sat up, turned around, and found Naruto resting peacefully in a medical cot next to his bed. He smiled, beaming to see that Naruto was safe and without any scratches. Several minutes later, the door opened, revealing Shizune, Kakashi, with his Ambu gear and dog mask, and Sandaime entering the room. Before closing the door behind them, "Tsunade-sensei," Shizune said cheerfully, "You finally woke up. I was so worried. How long was I unconscious?" Tsunade asked him. "Almost 4 days," Sandaime replied. "That missing ninja contaminated you with a massive overdose of chakra. If you were an ordinary woman, you would have died in a matter of minutes. But since you are a Sannin, the poison did not kill you, but severely weakened you and finally paralyzed you. You went into a coma after the poison took effect. Needless to say, I'm glad I found you when we did after your battle." The missing ninja, crippled and incapacitated, has been handed over to Ibiki for questioning after we found that note of his. In addition, the doctors managed to completely cure you and remove the poison from your body. Since then, you have fully recovered and will be able to leave this hospital very soon. How did you explain the whole blocking and searching incident from the village?" Tsunade asked him. Smiling, Sandai explained to me. "I explained to everyone that your newborn son was kidnapped by a treacherous shinobi who intended to sell him to one of our enemy villages, and that you went looking for him yourself even though the Zumbu were working. In any case, kidnapping the son of one of the loyal and legendary Sannin is a Class S crime. That explains all the gifts and other valuables found here in my room," Tsunade acknowledged. "Everyone thinks Naruto is my son." Officially, Sandaime intervened and smiled. "He is your son. Senju Uzumaki Naruto is now his new official name. I have already taken care of all the documentation and paperwork. You are officially his new mom." Tsunade beamed when she heard that. Looking at Naruto, who was still sleeping, she lifted him out of bed and lovingly cradled him. Sandai looked at her to me and said, "You doubted that you would be a good mother for the child, Tsunade. But after what Shizune explained to me, and what I saw with my own eyes after your battle with the kidnapper, I knew that I made the best decision." She sighed. "It hurts me to think that all this time, I was so worried about external enemies kidnapping Naruto, when I should have also been worried about possible traitors inside this village. And it almost cost us dearly." "We live and learn," Sarutobi-sensei, Tsunade commented. "We can't always predict what will happen next." Kakashi took off the Ambu dog mask and approached Naruto, who was still resting in Tsunade's arms. He looked at the boy with interest and said, "I still try to accept that my teacher is trapped inside his own son. The irony of the situation is quite unique. It's a pity that I can't take care of the Okage child myself. After all, Naruto is my master's son, and, as a former student of his father, Kakashi, Sandaime intervened, causing the Ambu to turn to him and stand firm. We already discussed that you will be too busy as Ambu to raise and take care of Naruto, and I made it very clear that the boy will need balance in his life. However, Sandaime continued, after what happened a few days ago, it is clear that the boy will face dangerous enemies, both inside and outside the walls of this village, especially because on the paper we found were the names of some enemies of Yondaime. Personally, I can't imagine what would happen if Yondaime's enemies took over Naruto. Therefore, I would like you to keep an eye on him from time to time. Kakashi nodded without a word, ready to accept the task. Sandai turned his gaze to Tsunade and said, "Tsunade, since you will raise Naruto, I took care of where you, Shizune and Naruto will live. They will live in a nice two-story house, not far from the Okage Tower. The Jennies have already moved all your and Shizune's things there. How much is it going to cost me?" Tsunade joked, although she was actually in debt to some people to whom she owed money. Some of those debts were a result of his gambling habits. "It won't cost you anything," Sandaime assured. "I bought the house and it's fully paid for. Everything else will be on your own, except the gifts, of course." Tsunade smiled and nodded wordlessly. "Now that I've taken care of that, I'll return to the Okage Tower," Sandaime said. "I'll assign some Jennings to take all the gifts and accessories to your new house, Tsunade. Kakashi will stand guard outside the room until the Genis arrive. Tsunade will leave for her new home this afternoon." Kakashi nodded before putting the mask back on. He and Sandai left the room for me, leaving Shizune and Tsunade alone with Naruto. The two women looked at the child, who was already wide awake in Tsunade's arms. Life was going to be very interesting for Tsunade, Shizune and Naruto. It will continue.